Well, good morning. Another Sunday has rolled around and the countdown toward the end of the year continues. This morning I'll visit with Nina Ittner, who helped create the Upper Peninsula Children's Museum and has a long-time involvement with the arts and culture in Michigan. And later in the show, I'll be reading a very special story. It's our own unique version of the classic "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." You don't want to miss it. We'll get this all started right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
The Upper Peninsula Children's Museum has become a major attraction in Marquette, but at one point, it was just an idea on the mind of our guest this morning. We'll talk about that and some other interesting projects and activities she's been involved with. Our guest is Nina Ittner. Nina, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Don.
First, a little shameless self-promotion on my own part. I will be doing a "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" story at the end of the show, and you've been exposed to some of my previous stories through the Economic Club of Marquette. They're worth watching, right?
Oh gosh, they're absolutely a treasure. Okay. Yeah, everyone should stay tuned through to the end until you do it, because I've watched many of them.
Right.
They're wonderful. You were clever.
This actually started at the Economic Club, and just something I did one year, and they seemed to like it, and it kind of became a tradition. And the story changes every year, and this year it's more unique to TV6. Well, history about you. You grew up in Lower Michigan, right?
Yes, I'm from Midland, Michigan.
Okay. And you got a degree from the University of Michigan?
Yes, University of Michigan.
And you came out and you became a teacher.
I was an art teacher. Okay. And I taught in Dundee, downstate, Everett, Dundee, and then in 1980 I moved to Marquette and then began teaching in Ishpeming, where I actually had your son as a student.
Right.
He was a fine student.
He's a unique artist and you are a unique art teacher, I can say that.
We had fun.
Right. Let's talk, in a sense, I'd kind of like to use the museum as an example of the great things that go on in the nonprofit world. You know, there are so many, and I look at Marquette County, and I know it happens all over the UP. But, you know, somebody gets an idea, a group gets together and works on a project, you know, and they build athletic fields, they build children's youth projects. I mean, they just do so many things. And it really makes our community what they are, isn't it? Do you agree with that idea?
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, the Upper Peninsula is a very unique place, and a person can do something. They can make an impact here. It may have been harder if I stayed in Ann Arbor to do something that I did here, and it is a group effort. I mean, I use me, but it's a we. But you know, when I moved into Marquette in 1980, there were a lot of things that it needed a lot of embellishment. It didn't have a lot of youth programming. And it really hadn't done any huge capital campaigns either, except for the hospital at that point. And so starting the Children's Museum was kind of a new venture, and we gathered people together, and I'd been a teacher. I saw opportunities that weren't there for kids that I had seen downstate. It was exciting to be able to try something. I think about it now and kind of I'm in awe of myself that I actually did it.
I'm in awe too.
You know, when I think of me standing in front of the Rotary with really just this crazy woman up there with this harebrained idea, but what soon became obvious to me is that I wasn't going to find other people to do this great idea. I had to do it myself. And
the amazing thing is, for those who don't know, you really took an old warehouse and turned it into not just a museum, but now a museum and an office complex as well.
Yeah, it's a super cool place. It's on the coolest street in Marquette, I'll have you know.
And I can share a personal story. I was with Cliffs Natural Resources, Cleveland Cliffs at that time, and you approached us about funding, and we eventually provided some funding. And Nina took me around the second story of the warehouse, and there's all this dark wood, and there's nothing.
Creepy stuff, yeah.
And she's got this dream, well, this is going to be this, and this is going to be this, and it was.
And it was, yeah. I mean, we took this old cold storage building, but it did. You know, you know, I have sometimes a blind optimism, and it's always good
I'd say
to
you're
have-
the eternal optimist, really, if
Right.
anyone is.
But you know, I always have to have people around me that kind of, you know, slap me and say, hey, this is the reality. But I just, it was a dream that, and we made that dream happen. And we took that old grummy, crummy little place that had, you know, light bulbs on strings, and we completely redid it. But we didn't do it with, I mean, Cliffs, yes, they gave us money, and so did the Kellogg
Well, many
Foundation.
people did. I didn't mean to single out
And no,
Cliffs,
and
yeah.
I'm just, but yet it was done not so much with money, but with the blood, sweat, and tears of a lot of people.
Right,
People who rolled up their sleeves and painted walls, built things, kids designing everything. I mean, we could never really afford to bring in a designer from some big city to design exhibits. So we asked kids to do it, and then we built it ourselves.
Right.
So now what you ended up with is a kind of what I, you know, kind of just a real homey kind of a children's museum. We're great in repurposing, and we have repurposed the entire time that we've started this children's museum. Where somebody is going to throw away lumber, we'll take that lumber, or throw away a chair, we'll take that chair, give it new life.
Okay, we'll talk more about it in just a couple of minutes. Back after this break on the Ryan Report. Our guest this morning is Nina Ittner. Nina's the executive director, and I guess really the founder of the Upper Peninsula Children's Museum. We were kind of finishing up on the fact that, you know, you've really, I guess you're never done, but you kind of have the building in pretty great shape right now, I think.
Oh, we have a dynamic building now. We just redid the whole facade of the
Right.
building. We're redoing all of the windows of the building. In fact, they were supposed to come in a couple months ago, but they're coming in the middle of January now. So we'll get new windows, new doors. It's been a huge transformation. And what that does is it also increases our insulation, so we hope to see some lower bills.
Right.
And we also just changed over all LED lights too.
Well, very good. I'm doing that at home as well. You know, pretty much. I know it's a never-ending task to continue to raise money for this museum. And you've got a couple of events coming up. Well, one free event today, actually. This is a free day at the museum this afternoon.
It's the Charter Spectrum annual free day at the Children's Museum. It's absolutely a fabulous time, 12 till noon. And then not only are we going to have the museum open doors to anyone who wants to come in, but we'll have lots of things going on in the courtyard. I don't know if you realize, but the Great Turtle Toy Store is in the Children's Museum entry, and this is a satellite store from the one in Mackinac Island, a delightful, magical store. And they're going to be doing tons of fun things in the courtyard. We're going to have movies in the foyer and popcorn, and so please come. And then also we'll have special deals on memberships, so you can get a membership for a whole year at the Children's
It's all
Museum.
this afternoon.
Yes.
You know, and I guess for those who aren't familiar with the museum, I've always wondered a little bit about the museum name, because a lot of people associate with museums, you know, places you kind of walk around and look at things, and this is just the opposite of that, isn't it, for
Well,
kids?
I kind of, you know, a museum is, I think, a place of learning. And
Right.
of course, our learning is all about imagination and hands-on, and
Right.
it's a place where a little one can go into maybe an airplane, and they don't have to be flying an airplane, they can be flying to the moon, but it's all about their minds and their imaginations, and play is the first step to learning. So we encourage them to play and think and dream.
And you have another event coming up for New Year's?
We have the elementary ball. It's a crazy fun event for little kids, and of course they're adults. And it's kids can come in. We have party hats and blowers, and Super One Food always gives us tons of cookies. And then at 7:30, everybody goes outside, and we have our own ball drop, and we have a super ball this year. Landon, our amazing exhibits guy, has completely redone this ball. It's not just one that's covered with aluminum foil. I won't speak of where there's that particular ball, but this one is lighted as strobes and
Wow.
mirrors, and we drop it, and the kids count it down, and at 7:30, there it is, it lights up, and everybody goes home.
And New Year's comes early for kids.
Yeah, that's
You've got a big event coming up. We were speaking about fundraising before, your culinary journey.
Yes, it's our 15th year of our culinary journey, and if anyone, if you haven't been to it, it's an eating extravaganza. We take our area's most outstanding chefs and restaurants, and then they put on a spread, and people roam around and eat, and then we have wonderful wines from Everyday Wines, and it's a fabulous event, absolutely fabulous. And tickets are on sale right now at the Children's Museum.
So, as I said before, fundraising is just a constant thing, isn't it?
It is a constant thing. I always call the Children's Museum my third child with special needs, and I work at it all the time. But no, fundraising is really about relationships. It's about people believing in a project and seeing the worth of it and the value of it. And you know, the Children's Museum has some larger donors, but we have a very strong foundation of smaller donors. So those people that give us just a small check at the end of the year build a tremendously strong base on which we function. And so, yes, we're absolutely, it's important for people just to give us some resource, but then again, people give us in-kind donations all the time too, which also help us to decrease our expenses, and it's fabulous. So yeah, fundraising is a constant game.
I think one of the great things for you is that some of your events have become like signature events. You know, they're not, oh, we have to go to that event again. It's, wow, that event is coming up. I think the culinary journey is one, and your art auction is
Celebrity
probably
art auction's crazy fun, and we just hit over $20,000 with that. Our biggest fundraiser yet.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
I've got some more questions. I want to talk about the arts in Michigan and how we're doing. We'll get back to that in just a couple of minutes after we take this break on the Ryan Report. Our guest again is Nina Idner. Let's talk about the arts in Michigan. You're not currently serving, but you served for, I think, 9 years on the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, appointed by the governor of Michigan.
By the governor.
What's the function of that organization?
Well, one, its main function, of course, is supporting the arts in the state of Michigan, and it's a funding agency also. With the money that is given, appropriated to the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs, cultural organizations from across the state can request funds at a certain time of year when grants are accepted. And then what happens is peer groups review those proposals, and then the funds are disseminated throughout the state. So for many of us, a number of years ago, the council kind of looked at changing the way that they disseminated the funds and asked people like me what we needed money for. And most of us need money just for general operations, just to keep our lights and our heat on. And so they've changed now to giving out what they call POPs, or operational grants. And those grants go to organizations like mine to just basic expenses, you know, staffing, et cetera. It's amazingly important.
And the amount of funding, I know, dropped significantly at one point. How are we doing today?
Well, it's slowly, gradually getting bigger. Through the course of my 9 years, I saw it go from like $28 million down to $2 million. And that's devastating for organizations like mine. We need that money. And so, and people have to understand, the government, everyone has to understand that cultural organizations are huge economic drivers in communities as well. And so oftentimes an organization will be the focal point of a tourist stay, and then they'll stay longer to go to another cultural organization and then spend money in hotels and restaurants, and they're also supporting the treasures of this great state.
What you know, apart from the economic benefits, why are the arts important?
Well, I think art is about us, about culture. I think about how I tell you about myself, or tell you about the situation in our world today. Much of it is through the arts, and it's a way of interpreting the world, and then you can come back into an institution. For instance, I just went to the Detroit Institute of Art, and just walking through that, it was really yelling the history and the culture of our community, our world. It tells huge stories to us, and it's our heart and soul, and the arts are.
And museums in Michigan, are they doing well?
Well, the Detroit Institute of Art, I was just there, and of course they've gone through great struggles, but it was absolutely packed to the hilt. I went to the Henry Ford, and it was packed to the hilt. Our own area museums are all kind of, clamoring for money, but they're all surviving, and they're all serving the community. And then also, arts and culture is not only museums, but they're also the symphonies, and those things are our treasures in our community.
We have only a minute left, but you've been involved in so many things, and you also managed to get a skateboard park constructed in Marquette.
Oh, we did. We got it, and it's a fabulous little place, and we're still making it better.
Okay, that's great. And we're in the holiday season, the Christmas season, and this takes on a little extra meaning for you, I think, this year. Having a grandchild?
Oh, yes, I do. I wondered where you were going with that.
Yes.
Yes, I have a grandchild. His name is Matthias, and I hate to say it, he's the cutest, the most wonderful kid in the entire world.
That's what most grandparents say.
That's right.
Again, the nonprofits in our area do so much, and it's important that we recognize that. And in talking about this today, we certainly recognize what you've done, but recognize that there are many others out in this area doing so much as well. Would you agree?
Yes, there's a lot going on, and it's wonderful. And as I said, there's a spirit in the Upper Peninsula that you're not going to see a lot of other places, and people make impact here, good impact.
Very good. Thanks for coming in and being with us today.
It was my pleasure.
Appreciate it very much. I'll be back with a very special Christmas Eve story after we take this break. Well, today we have something different to wrap up our show. I have a story for you. It's actually based on a very familiar Christmas Eve story, but it's our own unique version featuring the TV6 News staff. I hope you'll enjoy it. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and in each UP house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that Santa Claus soon would be there. But at TV6 on this cold winter night, the lights in the studio were still burning bright. Sophie Erber and Greg Trick had one more newscast to do, and Carl Bonak and Mike Ludlam were still working too. The morning news team left a long time ago. They all headed home early through the ice and the snow. The young ones who served on the morning news crew were too excited to sleep. It was too hard to do. Sam Bauman was restless with thoughts of Santa on his mind, hoping under his tree a new soccer ball he'd find. Ansley was lonesome for family far away, so she was baking cookies to share on Christmas Day. Cassie and her hubby watched a movie on TV. Will Ferrell's Elf is what they chose to see. Meantime, Vicki in her kerchief was asleep in her bed, while visions of Ansley's cookies danced in her head. Out at the bureaus, all was quiet that night. The doors were locked. They had turned out the light. Ali and Houghton had finished up for the day. There was no more news tonight, nothing else to say. In Iron Mountain, Monique was just settling in for her first Christmas Eve in Upper Michigan. Back at the station, the late news was on the air. It was a quiet night in news without much to share. Then it was time for weather on that Christmas Eve night, and Carl Bonak stepped forward from just out of sight. "Good evening," he said. "I have bad news, I fear. There's a blizzard that stretches from the North Pole to here. There will be no Santa. He just can't make it through this storm. I don't know what happened. This is just not the norm. There are highs and lows and cold fronts galore. It's a crazy weather map like I've never seen before." Then outside the studio there arose such a clatter, they all looked outside to see what was the matter. Away to the window they flew like a flash, tore open the shades and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below, when what to their wondering eyes should appear but an old GMC van that was stuck in first gear. Behind the wheel was a driver. They all knew just who. It was news director Steve Asplund. He would know what to do. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Ethan, now Rachel, now Ben and Harry, on Nick, on John, on Aaron and Jerry. Get me to the newsroom and don't drop the ball. Now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As they drew in their heads and were turning around, in the door Steve Asplund came with a bound. He was dressed all in orange, from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon let them know they had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work. He checked all the forecasts, then turned with a jerk. And as he looked at the group, he could see their dismay. But he said, "Don't give up. There's still hope for Christmas Day." Then Rebecca spoke up, saying, "This doesn't look right. These cords are all twisted and hidden from sight." "You're right," said Blair. "This is not what it should be. I'll get Steve to take a look. This is something he should see." The news director came over to check it all out and said, "This is the problem. Of that there's no doubt. Carl's weather maps are wrong. There's no massive snow. Santa will have clear sailing wherever he will go. The weather maps went crazy. The cables were amiss. There's no need to worry on a special night like this." So Carl went back on TV with good news to tell. "We had a scare," he said, "but it all turned out well. My work here is done," said Steve with a wave. "Santa is coming this Christmas to save." And laying his finger aside of his nose, he pulled on his cap, and from his chair he arose. Steve jumped back in his van, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." I'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, this morning we had a little fun with the Santa Claus side of Christmas and our own version of the unique Christmas Eve tale. But of course there's another side to this holiday as many celebrate the real story of how Christmas came to be. And so let me share these thoughts with you on our last show before Christmas. While we sing about peace on earth, we see a world where so many of the headlines are focused on all the violence and hatred we hear about every day. It should be a reminder that the one whose birth is celebrated at this time of year had an answer to those problems. He said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another." It's a simple message, but regardless of religious beliefs, if everyone, everywhere, could all just take that message to heart, what a great world this would be. The very best to you and your family for this Christmas and holiday season. We'll see you next Sunday morning.